took way longer to put together than what it should have. We'll watch it again. No, we won't watch it again. So, in case you haven't guessed already, I'm a pretty big Stranger Things fan, and this presentation does include a few spoilers. So, if you haven't seen the show yet, I'm sorry for that. But also, where have you been, and why haven't you watched it? Because it's the greatest show ever. To kick things off, quick show of hands, who actually has seen Stranger Things, just so I can get a sense of the reference. Okay, good. All right. Second show of hands, who's incorporated an AI feature into a project this year? Ooh, it's kind of roughly about the same. Interesting. That's good, because that's why we're here. So I guess for the next little while, I just want to take you to a place where I spend a lot of my time. It's not in the dev cave, it's not in the strategy space, it's somewhere in between the two. But before I do, just let me introduce myself quickly. I'm Millie. I run a digital agency in Canberra called Jude Digital with 3 other co-founders. And I find it really hard to describe clearly what it is that I do. Lots of design stuff, a little bit of dev stuff, project management, and everything in between that happens with running a business. So basically, if there's something happening at the experience layer, the bit where a digital service and a human comes together, that's where I like to get involved. And Jude Digital, we're fairly new. We've been around for about 2.5 years now. Just last week, we won the Australian Small Business Champion Award for web development, so we're pretty stoked about that. Thank you. We're really proud, and being Canberra-based, we obviously work with a lot of government, but we're also really proud of the work that we do for not-for-profits and our Indigenous partnership that we've got with Kira Services as well through the GovCMS panel. So that's a bit about me. Let me just through it too quickly. Get back to this. Yeah, definitely a bit enough about me. I don't like talking about myself very much. But what I want to talk about here is about change, the things that are changing for the people who design and create experiences in Drupal. Because here's what I'm seeing. On the surface, there's nothing really that's changing too much or looking super different. Your Drupal admin theme still looks like your Drupal admin thing. You still have forms and you still have a bunch of different fields, and users are still clicking submit buttons. But underneath, and this is where I want to spend some time together with you guys, is there's something being built. For Stranger Things fan, if you think back to season 2, underneath Hawkins, while everyone's getting on with their lives, the mind flayer is digging tunnels and the vines are spreading through. Connections are really forming, and our mate Bob Newby, sweet doomed Bob, he works out the Will's drawings aren't just the scribbles of a really traumatised child, they're a map of what's being built underneath the town. And that's a pretty fair picture, I think, of where we actually are with AI right now. The portals, so the AI features that users are touching at scale in production, those are still pretty rare at the moment. Almost everything interesting that I've seen and I'm going to talk about today is somewhere between that proof of concept and beta, or sitting there in the tooling, but it's not really adopted at scale by our clients. So we're not in the AI is everywhere moment just yet. We're in the tunnel digging moment, I think, and that's actually a pretty interesting place to be. So here's what's being built underneath and where I think UX and UI designers should be paying attention. When I look at the field of UX today, I can see 3 major shifts. So the first shift is about how users talk to your website. For the last 20-something years, give or take, we've all designed roughly the same search experience. There's a magnifying glass icon, usually top right, a search box, users type in 2 or 3 keywords like membership renewal or payment eligibility or something like that, and the system spits back a list of results ranked by relevance, give or take. That's the world that we've built. Keywords in, list of links come out, the user does the work of clicking through what they actually need. So now the shift that we're seeing, obviously thanks to AI, is that users have learned, they're not learning, they have learned already because it's embedded itself so quickly, a new way of communicating with digital tools. They've learned to ask questions in full sentences and to describe what they really want. So context, constraints, the full picture, they're happy to go nuts with it. And they're starting to expect an answer back. So not just 10 links, but like an actual answer to get to what they want. Now for me, this moment can be thought of a bit of a Joyce Byers moment. Stay with me. In season 1, Joyce is communicating with Will, who's stuck in the upside down. The phone keeps frying out when she tries to talk to him. Physical letters won't work, so she eventually strings together Christmas lights across her living room. So 1 bulb per letter of the alphabet, and they are able to communicate letter by letter. And it's a completely new communication interface, born out of necessity because the old one wasn't working for them. And that's where users are right now. They're learning a new way to communicate with digital tools. They're using plain English. They're doing multi-turn conversations. And they're more increasingly using voice as well. And these habits aren't being formed on your Drupal site. They're being formed somewhere else. Users have spent the last 18 months chatting to ChatGPT, to Copilot, to Gemini, and the response to this within government and on the Drupal platform is just starting. So places like the Australian Government's Department of Veterans Affairs in Australia, they've been publicly trialling a version of AI search on their website. I think that's the first Australian federal agency to do that out in the open. The Department of Finance has also just released their alpha version of Gov AI to a group of public servants. And from there we can see that a pattern is starting to form. Users clicking into government sites are at the moment hoping they can just ask a question in their own words but not type a keyword. And soon this will move from a hope to an expectation. But there's this tension, right? So the little search icon is still staying up there in the top right corner. It still says search, and users have got decades of muscle memory telling them what that means. A few keywords, maybe did you mean, maybe a list of links if they're lucky. So if you've quietly upgraded your search experience to have something that's AI powered, semantic search, some conversational results, natural language understanding, and you haven't told the user about that, they won't yet use it in the way that you've built it. They'll type opening hours and get a list or just leave. And so here's where it gets useful for us designers, because while the industry is still settling on patterns, a vocabulary here is forming. I'm sure you guys have probably spotted these too, but I've seen kind of close to a dozen of these patterns forming for designing AI-assisted interfaces. So let me point at 3 that I think matter a lot for the input shift that we're talking about. So there's the prompt preset and templates, so pre-built starting points for users that help them formulate that query. So think of the help me write kind of experience, the panels in Google Docs or Gemini, where you can pick from, help me write more professional, more casual, before you even start typing and engage with that. The pattern's doing a really good job at that the search filter used to do. Before you even get started typing, it scopes the user's intent before the AI does its bit. It also helps with users who have lower digital literacy as well and lower confidence with the subject matter, because those fundamentals of UX design are still true. The recognition over recall idea, it still offers plenty of value there. There's also the refine output pattern. So that's small contextual actions on AI-generated content, so the user can fix the answer without rerunning the whole prompt. Apple's writing tools is a good example here. And then there's the verified versus AI-generated kind of pattern that is going to be really important in government in particular, we think. Visual cues, those are, that distinguish AI-written content from human-verified content. So this is the one that I think will be really interesting to unpack with our government clients, because if you don't signal that something came from AI, users don't know whether to trust it, and trust is like the foundation of government services. So trust, very much the entire battle. I could talk heaps about the topic of trust, but that's not the talk for today. My main point here is that designers have started naming these experiences. There's this growing pattern library, You don't have to invent every pattern from scratch if you're a UX designer here. So my first message, and I'll come back to this, is if you don't believe UX as a discipline, I don't believe, that UX as a discipline is actually being replaced by AI at all. If anything, these are the exact types of problems that we're here to solve for, and the landscape's just getting broader. So like, how do you cue a new behaviour in an interface that already has 20 years of established meaning, like that search experience I talked about? How do you make AI's role more visible without being intrusive in an experience that they're already familiar with? So that's the real job that we have ahead of us as UX and UI designers. Right, so shift number 2. Most of the conversation about AI in UX is about the user-facing side. The chatbot in the corner, the summary in the top of the article, the personalised hero blocks that can come into play. But I reckon that's about half the story, because when you're working in Drupal, and I'm guessing a lot of you actually do that, there are 2 interfaces that actually really matter when you're producing a Drupal website. There's the one your end user sees on the public site, then there's the one your publishers see in the admin. And it's the publisher experience where I think there's a lot of undervalued opportunities sitting right now for good UX design to tackle. Most of what I'm about to describe is still in pilot, POC or vendor demos, and we've seen a lot of that today. Bits of it are in the Drupal contrib space, but very little of it is kind of shipping in production at scale at the moment. So that's exactly why I think this is really the right time to be paying attention to it. There's all these tunnels being dug, back to that metaphor. They're being dug all around us right now. And the patterns that win in a few years from now are the ones that are being really thoughtfully designed right now in this period. So it's about being engaged with them and being part of it. It's not the ones that are being hobbled together really quickly, and we're starting to see those get phased out over the time from the very early beginnings of AI. So yeah, if you really think about it, the front end has kind of had decades of design love. We've had design systems, pattern libraries, component libraries to work with. They all win awards, and meanwhile there's the editor experience that sits there. Most CMSs, and I'm kind of being polite here that they're just barely functional. And AI, I think, is going to start to change that. So let me give you some examples of what I could see some of the early teams are doing. So there's a content team member writing a news article. In the old world, obviously they need to remember to set the metadata, the tag articles, write alt text for every image, choose a feature image, generate the social card, write the meta description, set the publish date. All those are little interface moments. Each one has its own decision to make. So now we have the capability for AI to suggest all of them directly within the UI, and the publisher's reviews and tweaks and just accepts the work now rather than actually doing it. Work that used to take them 30 minutes to do properly now only takes them like 5 minutes. And the really great part about that is that it gets done properly because the friction is gone. I don't know if anybody's spent any time with publishing teams of websites, and you can get a real mixed bag, I think, in terms of experience levels and attention to detail and love of the job. So these sorts of tools not only make it quicker, but get it done properly as well. Anyone inherited a site with a few thousand images with no alt text attached to them? Anybody in that position? Yeah, we've all met that site. So now with the AI in the authoring layer, it can obviously sweep through and suggest the alt text. It can kind of appear for the publisher to just choose. They can decide to accept, edit or override. And this is, for me, I think, just one of many accessibility opportunities that are ready to be unlocked from the publisher experience. And when it is, I think accessibility outcomes for users will dramatically improve without the publisher actually needing to be an expert. So it's got all these spin-off effects from a UXer paying attention to what that publisher experience is, knowing what tools are available, but presenting them in the way that makes sense that the publishers will use them and know how to police them, endorse them. That once that gets published, that flow-on effect to everybody else downstream that gets to consume that content is really, really quite a special time, I think. And then there's the bit that Drupal is really wonderfully placed for is the context structure and the relationships. So Drupal's data model really is one of the best. And so my dev team will tell me that a well-structured Drupal site is a really beautiful thing for the AI tool to work with. It can surface the related content, it can spot duplicate pages, it can draft taxonomy, it can recommend internal links. And the investment that your teams have made in structured content is really going to start to pay off, really have a different kind of dividend for your team. So the UX opportunity at the back end genuinely is quite huge. And here's the thing, is most clients at the moment, they're not asking for it yet because they don't really know it. They don't know what's available to them. They don't know how it's going to change their day jobs. So they don't know how it's going to free up time to maybe go and learn more about how their Drupal site works or get more involved in more feature development over time. And I guess another kind of throwback to Stranger Things bit here is thinking about Dustin in season 2. He builds this radio setup in his attic. He calls it Cerebro. He's using it to pick up long distance signals he could never hear with his own ears, patterns he couldn't catch just on his own. And that is what good AI in the publisher experience was going to start to feel like for people. The editor is still in charge. They're still going to be making the decisions, but their senses are extended now. They can see across the whole site. They can spot patterns. They can get flagged of things that are working or not working, catch things that used to slip through the cracks, even things like those pesky copy-paste content and the bullet not actually being a real bullet, just being a character there. Those ones always trip people up. The AI here is the radio. It's not replacing the editor, it's really just giving them that Cerebro. So if you want to have a look at what's actually being built now, the Drupal AI Conduit module that has been spoken about quite a bit over these past few days has crossed about 13,000 sites now, so that's pretty impressive. And it includes obviously a whole bunch of the demos like this AI CK editor, and it's about, I think, putting some of these tools in front of the clients and the content publishers that you work with to let them live it and breathe it and experience what's going on there, because the more they understand it, the more you can work with them as a UXer to make sure that they're getting a nicely optimized publishing experience. So the second message here is when you're kind of scoping a Drupal project from a UX UI lens and you're thinking about where AI might be able to add value, don't just look at the front end here. There are really big and defensible UX wins for your clients in the next 12 months, I think, within that publisher experience. The interface is something that is used multiple times a day throughout the day by many, many people. So yeah, don't forget about that one. So right, shift number 3, and this is the one I think a lot of designers and developers are quietly nervous about. I know they are on my team, so let's just put it on the table, I guess, is I can see that a lot of tasks that used to take design and development teams, you know, a 2-week sprint to complete, can now actually technically be done in as little as 3 days, and that's banking on all of the project work that goes around making sure that feature has been endorsed and signed off. So the actual doing of it is even quicker than that. Obviously, if you have the right tools and approach. Things like analysing all the way up front, analysing the data. You could do some really, really rapid user research now, putting together a discovery brief, generating wireframe variations, converting those wireframes into code, filling the UI with the right kind of microcopy. It can all be done as a workflow heaps faster than it ever could before. So the question everyone is unsure about is, does that mean that you need fewer of us? And I don't think it actually does. I think it means we get to spend our time on different stuff and better stuff. So here's the analogy. 11 in the early seasons, she can do extraordinary things, but the moment she uses her powers, she's absolutely wrecked. She's got the nosebleed, can't stand up, she needs some more egos to keep going. So most AI tools right now feel a bit like that when you're using them. They can produce something genuinely impressive really, really quickly, But then there's this cost of judgment that comes off the back of that. Someone has to look at the output, decide whether it's actually good, whether it makes sense for the user, and in the context of your project and what your clients are asking for, whether it's suitable. So you have to also check whether it's accessible and whether it's on brand, whether the recommendation is actually even correct if you're doing from the user research side of things. So that someone is us. It's, you know, the designers that are part of the crew. So whatever time we get back from AI is time that we can spend in deeper feature design work, deeper understanding the problem space, a lot more time kind of fleshing out what's going to work for maybe the edge cases. Bits of a project we're thinking more about user behaviour, accessibility, content strategy, the whole experience, because there's lots and lots of bits of a website build that never really get the love and attention that it needs from a user experience perspective because of the constraints of time, scope, budget. You can only get so much done. So I think that's where we can kind of play in the new territory. There's also a second thing, is that we have to design interfaces where AI is part of the feature itself. And that definitely is new territory for us. Things we need to start thinking about as UX and UI designers now is how does a user start a conversation with AI within the website that they're used to visiting? What does that input actually look like and how is it encouraging them in? How do you show that the response is generated rather than retrieved because they want to know where it's come from? How do you let the user correct it or refine it or push back? How do you handle a confident wrong answer? So that's about how do you kind of, I played around with the contact us form is a standard of most websites you build, but behind that is a massive ecosystem of business process and triaging and funneling of the right question to the right people. AI lets to kind of surface that now on the website experience, but you kind of got to make sure you kind of can help work through the answer with them, and if it's not quite the right answer, where do they go next? What team do you direct them to? And how do you indicate confidence in what you're telling them as well when this is coming from an LLM? These are the interaction design problems we haven't solved yet as an industry. The big platforms are inventing them. They're inventing them in public in real time. So ChatGPT looks different now to what it did a year ago. So does Copilot, so does Gemini. We're all just working it out. The practical bit for UI designers in this room is if you want to be ahead of this curve, I reckon just learn the system that you're actually designing for. So if the system is Drupal, get familiar with how Drupal actually builds pages. The paragraphs, the field structures, the view modes, the component model, the closer the way you structure your Figma file or your design files, the closer that maps to the way Drupal thinks, the more leverage that AI is going to give you and your team when you're working on these things. There's an emerging way of working that's very new and somewhat experimental at the moment, but the idea is pretty striking, and it uses the Figma MCP to let GitHub Copilot kind of read your Figma file and then write to Drupal Canvas YAML on the other end. We've been exploring that at Jude, and we've been seeing some differing results, but it's been really exciting to kind of play around with that, because what it's doing is bridging that gap between design and build, and we're being able to watch our UX and UI designers who have spent their lives talking to real users, understanding how they think. They hold a lot of knowledge, but there's a wall that stops at their Figma file before they hand it over. So this is kind of bringing it together and being able to have them part of the build process a lot more intimately. The main call out for the creators of the Figma files in the room today here is that make sure all your layers are clearly named and structured. Copilot and the other tools that you might be using really rely on this structure to generate the right output. So that's kind of where we've been playing around a lot to make sure how have we named things, because the single button going through is fine, but the more complex the component gets, and when naming conventions start to deviate, people bring with them historically like old naming conventions from old design systems or UI kits that they're used to playing with. That's where things start to get a bit messy. So you want that nice consistency and getting really close to the code. So I guess designing beyond the screens to create the systems that AI can read is kind of where we should be playing at the moment. The closer that your design file speaks to the same language, the more leverage that you're going to have as the designer to influence what's being built. So here's a question I've been trying to answer with my own design team. If we want to advance our own skills in this space, what actually works? We think that there's 3 habits that are genuinely moving the needle for us. They're free, which is great, and they'll put you ahead of probably most designers in the next 12 months. First one is use these tools every day on real work. Not toy projects, not weekend experiments, your actual client and internal deliverables. If you can't do client work, do stuff for your company. Draft a persona in Claude, generate some microcopy, use Gemini to do a competitive analysis, use Copilot to write a test plan, just get involved in it, because the intuition that you build as a UX UI designer, and there's a lot of strong instincts in there, that's why you're good at that job. That's where knowing AI helps, and the intuition that you build makes you work through it a lot faster. I don't think that you can be clear about designing AI features if you don't actually use them yourself. So I think, yeah, that's the first one. Number 2 is, do this, learn the shape of the system that you're actually designing for. So if that's Drupal, learn how Drupal actually builds a page, paragraphs, fields, view modes, components, the theme structure, the naming conventions that developers like to use. You don't need to write the code, but the moment that you understand how the system's vocabulary works, and your design files are going to start speaking the same language as the build. Number 3 is build a personal pattern library. So every time you see an AI feature in the wild, whether it's in Notion or Linear, ChatGPT, Apple Writing Tools, whatever crosses your screen, screenshot it. That's what we get our team to do, and see if you can tag it by what kind of pattern you think it's using. If you don't know the name for it, just give it a name for it. Over time, you're going to start seeing a few patterns emerge. Some of those ones I had up on screen, the refine output, verified versus generated. I know Microsoft has a whole library of different kind of patterns, so they're all starting to form at the moment and start to kind of aligning. Over time, you're going to start to see where the UX value lies when it comes to implementing AI features into your interface. You've all been trained to see these patterns, not just features. So daily use, system literacy, and pattern collection. Those are the 3 habits. And none of them require a course, and they can all just compound off each other when you're doing them all together. So here's the Stranger Things callback. Kids in the show, Mike, Lucas, Dustin, Will, 11, Max. They're not the smartest people in Hawkins. They're not the most experienced. They're the ones who are willing to go look at the weird thing and go and engage with it. They're willing to try things, form an opinion, get it wrong, work it out. So I think that's the move here. Engage with the weird thing, try it, break it, push it. I think that's a Daft Punk song, I think. Form an actual opinion about it. Don't outsource your thinking to the hype cycle, and don't pretend that the gate isn't open either. The designers and the developers who come out of this period well aren't going to be the ones who adopted AI the fastest. They're going to be the ones who stayed curious the whole time, stayed a bit skeptical, and kept testing things with real users. So pulling it together, I know we're at time now. There's those 3 shifts. It is 1, users are starting to talk to the digital tools in plain English. That classic interface is going to be clashing with the AI interface that's coming into play. Number 2, the biggest move and the most undervalued opportunity, I think, is leading into that publisher experience and helping those guys out as much as you can. And number 3 is the efficiency gains that we're going to get from the tools that we're using aren't a reason to do less. They're going to free us up to go and do more experimental stuff. UX isn't being replaced. The demigorgons aren't coming for our jobs. The work's getting bigger, not smaller. And the remit really is actually widening for us. There's more to think about. There's more surfaces now to design for. There's more conversation to have with clients about what good looks like. So, like Joyce, string those Christmas lights across in her living room, one bulb at a time. We are definitely at the moment inventing a new way to communicate as we go. And it's really awkward at first, but it's also going to be really fun. That's it.
Thank you, that was very good. Questions?
Hi, Millie. Thank you so much. Appreciate the Stranger Things and the typography as well. So nice slides. On the point of editorial experience that has to go, that we need to design more and think about more. Is there anything you and your team do transfer that from side to side? And the follow-up question is, what about UX integration part? If you do that for client A, would you have some sort of back-end, theme or some way, or maybe a Figma for that? How you would actually transfer to another client?
Yeah. The short answer is not yet. But obviously we are pattern people and we love having our little collection of things that we've learned from and worked well. So at the moment it's just about storytelling with new clients to tell them about what we've been able to do with other clients and try and get them buy-in, engagement and see the value. And that's where we are in demo land at the moment, and it's super useful and super valuable. Over time, that is definitely the game plan, is to, just like anything when it comes to any kind of process that we're working through when it comes to building a website, we learn the things that work well and we keep that in our little toolkit, and the other things that not so well go behind. We're deliberately not investing too much into that. I've been on a few projects throughout my career, which is, let's build an internal design system and that be our thing, and I've just watched it explode and be really hard to maintain and kind of go nowhere. That's probably happened about 4 or 5 times across different workplaces for me. So, and AI is changing so much. So at the moment, I think it's just about watching and making sure the team cognitively understand what's going on and have it in their mind ready to kind of talk about. And then I reckon it'll just be really clear, the time will be right when we understand, okay, now's the time to consolidate this down. Here's our Figma file, this is the thing we're going to work from now. At the moment, we're just experimenting.
So you talked about collecting the UI patterns of AI. I thought that was really interesting. I'm just curious about your experience of, as you earlier, recognizing an AI feature was put in to distract the user and stop them doing the 8 tasks they are already prioritized through. You're going to take them through some random AI bullshit that's never going to work and try to get them to point to some unstructured spreadsheet and fail, compared to exploration, curiosity, challenging institutions, like how the more use their time to explore stuff that they've learned. Sorry, try again.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good call out. I think for our company, most of our clients are government, and I think that's kind of where the space is that we can play in now that we can actually do things quicker. So we don't have to spend all our time coming up with new branded card design components or a carousel or whatever it is that we're kind of building at the time. We can actually start exploring the job to be done, the user journey, and when's the right time to be interrupting what kind of user as they're kind of going through that workflow. And that's really, I think, that's a whole other talk as well. I think that's throwing everything on its head in everything we know about service blueprinting and understanding the user journey as they go through, because it's never really was linear, but we made a way to jam it into something that's linear, and now AI is just Wild West, jumping them in and out of things. And you've got all sorts of digital confidence levels jumping into the site. So yeah, I don't know what the answer is yet, but we're just kind of exploring with what works and what doesn't. And to be honest, our fallback is at the moment, go do usability testing once you've introduced this and put it in front of real people so they can actually see it and play with it and see how they're responding to it. And if it does throw them down the wrong path, that's clearly not the right time to be introducing it for them.
I recently saw a website that had your normal, like a slider, so it had human view and then it had agentic view. And I was wondering, are we going to see more websites that present 2 versions of the same content? So that, or is that is that just a neat parlor trick, and then the agent's always going to be able to read HTML and understand it?
I've been thinking about this a lot with my team because we do a lot of focus on accessibility, inclusion with websites, and I hope so. I hope we do see that more. I hope somebody can change a dial and it can change the complexity level of the content you're reading all the way down to easy read, all the way back up to, no, I'm a lawyer and I want the actual real world and the real policy. You can play around like that. I want to see.
I can send you one of those.
Hey, good on. Yeah, I hope so.
Cool. Anyone else?
Do you have a good one? Thanks, Millie. It's great to see you speak. I think the first time. I'm wondering about, you talk more about from the UX point of view, but do you sort of see that Figma file as being a bit of a divide, and would that go both ways in a cross-functional team? Are you seeing that, like, the devs are developing more nuance in terms of their understanding of UX patterns?
They are. There's a difference that a UX UI designer, and obviously I'm biased because this is the world that I've come from, but there's something that we get exposed to that devs don't normally get exposed to, where we're out with the people and out in the problem, and we're looking at the actual objectives of the service that we're building and working on. So there's a little bit more info and intel I think that designers can bring to that part of the journey, but 100% yes, that bridge is closing. There are so many times where you're like, guys, the devs, they've built this one component for the last 10 years. They know exactly how it should kind of look. They've got good taste. They can see the color palette. Just let them go. You don't need to be like, no, hands off. The designer can't touch that. That frees the designer up to go and explore those spaces I just talked about. So yeah, I definitely think it goes both ways.